He had a gun. Not a metaphor. Not a misunderstanding. A real, cold, matte black pistol, leveled at my 12-year-old golden retriever, Max, who stood motionless between me and the self-proclaimed HOA cop who just stormed onto my land barking about leash lengths and dangerous animals. I didn't speak. I didn't yell. I just stood still, watching the barrel wobble slightly as the man's hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation, like he wanted the excuse to shoot, like he was daring me to stop him. He had no idea what kind of man he was daring. I'm not a suburban dad. I'm a retired Navy SEAL. And he just made the worst mistake of his life. What would you do if someone threatened your family's protector, unaware you were trained to end threats like him? After 2 decades in the military, 12 of those with the SEALs, I thought I knew what peace was. But it wasn't until I retired and bought that modest single-story house on the edge of Ridgewater Pines that I finally felt it. Morning coffee on the porch, no gunfire, no protocols. Just the sound of cicadas, the creak of the rocking chair beneath me, and the soft jingle of Max's collar as he patted across the deck to lay at my feet. Max wasn't just a dog, he was my shadow. A 90-pound golden retriever with more discipline in one paw than most grown men have in their whole damn bodies. Trained alongside nines, certified in advanced obedience and search patterns, he was steady under pressure, loyal to a fault, and smarter than some of the officers I used to train with. He'd wake me from night terrors by licking my hand. He'd nudge my daughter away from the oven if she wandered too close. And when my joints ached worse than usual, he'd bring me the morning paper without a scratch on it. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him. The kids loved him. The mailman carried treats just for him. But then the HOA elected a new safety and security officer, a man named Carl DuPont. If a mall cop and a boot camp dropout had a baby, it'd grow up to look just like Carl. Early 40s, buzz cut with no reason, Oakleys worn at night, and a fake badge clipped to his belt that said, HOA Compliance Enforcement Unit. He had the swagger of someone who'd spent his life being picked last and had finally found a podium to stand on. From the moment he moved in, Carl had it out for Max. First, it was a verbal warning about off-leash behavior, even though Max was leashed, calm, and sitting at my heel like a statue. Next week, it was a written citation for threatening posture, because Max apparently stood too tall and looked at another dog with intensity. I laughed when I read that. I shouldn't have. The week after that, I found a neon pink notice duct taped to my mailbox. Noise violation. Unpermitted animal sounds. It was timestamped at 2:13 a.m. Funny thing is, Max sleeps in my room. Doesn't bark, doesn't whimper, doesn't even snore. That same night, my cameras caught Carl walking by the fence, pointing his phone at our porch like he was filming evidence. I confronted him the next day, asked him why the hell he was surveilling my home. He grinned like a man who'd just found a nail and thought he was holding a hammer. Just ensuring community safety, he said, tapping that fake badge like it meant something. Can't be too careful with dangerous breeds. I looked him in the eye and told him Max was a therapy-certified dog with military-grade training. He shrugged. Looks aggressive to me. After that, it was constant. HOA warnings, mysterious complaints. Neighbors told me Carl had been holding informal meetings at the clubhouse, calling Max a liability, saying certain dogs attract certain elements. The passive aggression turned into active provocation. I found Max's water bowl dumped out twice. One morning, our gate was left open. Thankfully, Max is trained to stay put. Another time, my daughter told me Carl had stood across the street and whistled at Max, trying to get him to react. He didn't. Max just sat there, tail still, eyes watching. It drove Carl insane. One afternoon, I caught Carl leaning over the fence, muttering something. Max was sitting calmly, just watching him, and Carl said loud enough for me to hear, "Let's see how long you stay a good boy." That's when I stopped drinking coffee on the porch and started keeping my sidearm holstered at the hip again. I filed a formal complaint. The HOA's response? Mr. DuPont is acting in good faith to preserve neighborhood safety. No recourse, no action, nothing but silence and the rising tension that wrapped around our house like barbed wire. Then came Saturday. Clear skies. Mild breeze. My wife and daughter had gone to the farmer's market. Max and I were out front, him lying in the sun near the garden beds while I checked the mailbox. I heard the side gate unlatch. Not open, unlatch. I turned. Carl stood in my backyard, boots on my grass, clipboard in one hand, the other resting on the pistol holstered at his hip. Not a taser. Not pepper spray. A Glock. Civilian model. No department issue. He didn't say hello, didn't explain. Just scanned the yard like he was sizing up a raid. Max stood slowly, not barking, not growling, just alert. That calm readiness I'd seen 1,000 times in 1,000 war zones. Carl's hand twitched. His gaze locked onto Max. That dog's been reported, he said, stepping further onto my property. Aggressive, non-compliant. I have authority to remove him. I stepped between them immediately, voice low. You're trespassing, Carl. Leave now. He didn't. Instead, he reached for the pistol and drew it like it was a damn Western. The slide wasn't just visible, it was back and loaded. Step aside, he ordered, finger brushing the trigger guard. Max didn't move, neither did I. Put the gun down, I said quietly. My hands were at my sides, not reaching, just steady. You're not law enforcement. You don't have authority. That's a felony you're holding. Carl's face twisted, not in fear, but rage.
This dog is a threat to the community,
he snapped. Max took one half step forward, placing himself directly between Carl and me, and Carl's arms tensed, like he was actually preparing to fire. That's when I moved. Slowly, deliberately. I stepped in front of Max and stared down the barrel, calm as a tide coming in. My voice dropped to a growl. You want to point that gun, Carl? Then do it at someone who can point one back. And in that still moment, with the gun aimed at my dog, on my land, surrounded by nothing but wind and silence, I realized something chilling. He wanted me to move. He wanted me to give him a reason. Because Carl wasn't just a man drunk on power. He was a coward, looking for permission to act like a tyrant, and he thought I was just another civilian. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The sheriff never showed. No squad car, no questions, no clipboard. Just a polite voicemail 2 hours later telling me that HOA matters are civil unless a discharge occurs, and that I should document future incidents for potential litigation. I had called the moment Carl raised that gun. Sent over video from my doorbell cam and footage from my yard cam that caught the full sequence, the draw, the threat, the trembling rage on his face as he aimed at Max. But there was no knock at Carl's door. No confiscation, no citation, nothing. Like it had never happened. When I brought it up at the next HOA meeting, I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I played the video on a laptop in the back row. 30 seconds of cold, hard proof. Carl entering my yard. Carl pulling the gun. Carl screaming about authorized removal. Dead silence in the room. Until Diane, the HOA board president, cleared her throat and smiled like I'd just interrupted her yoga session. This appears highly edited, she said, waving a hand like she was brushing off dust. We can't act on isolated home footage. Carl was responding to repeated resident concerns. He was within his rights to conduct an observation. He aimed a loaded weapon at my dog, I said quietly. On private property. Diane didn't blink. Perhaps you should consider reevaluating your animal's behavior. Certain breeds have documented temperament issues. That's when I knew. It wasn't just Carl. It was them. All of them. Backing him, enabling him, hiding behind fine print and bureaucracy like it was Kevlar. I had vet documentation, obedience certifications, even military training credentials for Max. I sent it all in. They replied with a single-page notice titled, Preliminary Aggressive Animal Classification, Pending Board Vote. No appeal window, no clarification. Just a checkbox beside the phrase, Dangerous Breed Behavior Under Review, Max, the dog who once sat still while fireworks cracked over his ears, who stayed calm in the back of Black Hawks, who guarded my daughter like she was treasure. Dangerous? The week after that, we received 3 separate violation notices. One claimed our perimeter fence was non-uniform in color. Apparently, a knot in the wood had darkened during a storm. Another cited unsanctioned plant height, because our rosemary bush grew an inch past the height of our porch railing. And the third was for obstruction of view. Max, lying on the porch. Too large, too visible, blockage of neighbor sightlines. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so coordinated. They weren't enforcing rules, they were testing us. Pressing in? Every day, a new envelope in the mailbox. A new photo paper clipped to a form. A timestamp. A red arrow pointing to some imagined offense. Our trash can 3 inches too far left. My boots left on the porch during a rainstorm. My daughter's bike leaning against the garage door for longer than 15 minutes. Then, they took it up a notch. My wife's SUV, a gray Ford Edge, parked in our own driveway, was towed at 3:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. The slip taped to the front door said it had obstructed emergency vehicle access. We live at the end of a cul-de-sac. The SUV was fully within the boundaries of our property, not even near the curb. When we called the towing company, they told us the request came from HOA Special Compliance Officer DuPont. Carl, they charged us $370 to get it back. You'll need to coordinate future parking with the board, the tow operator said with a smirk. My wife cried in the car that night, hands shaking on the steering wheel. This isn't a neighborhood, she said. It's a war zone in disguise. I didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong. The next weekend, I came home from picking up hardware and saw them. 2 men in reflective vests standing in my backyard. One was Carl. The other I didn't recognize. They weren't measuring. They weren't surveying. They were poking around the dog's enclosure, opening the gate, scanning the soil with a metal detector. My blood went cold. Perimeter compliance check, Carl said when I stormed over. Under HOA emergency authority. That gate is locked, I said. Was, Carl corrected, tossing me the padlock cut and bent. It's a hazard, Mark. You've got exposed hardware, trip risk, and that dog's house isn't setback compliant. Max was inside, behind the glass door, pacing but silent, watching, waiting. I walked them off the property myself. Didn't touch them, didn't threaten, just stared until they left. But something in me turned that day. Not just anger, not just fury. It was cold, focused, familiar. The same coil I used to feel before night ops, the readiness, that itch in your teeth when something's about to go bad. My daughter Ava, who used to ride her bike to the mailbox, stopped going outside. I asked her why one morning when she was curled on the couch, staring at her untouched cereal. She didn't answer. Just pointed to the front window. That's when I noticed the car. Black SUV. Parked halfway up the street. Same one I'd seen on 3 different days now. Always there. Always running. What happens if he comes back with more people? Ava whispered. What happens if he takes Max? She was 11, and she sounded like a war refugee. That night, she had her first panic attack. Thought it was a heart attack. Couldn't breathe. Clutched her chest and cried until her whole body trembled. My wife blamed me. I didn't argue. I just held Ava while Max laid beside us, silent and still, head resting on her knee. That was the night I moved the cameras. I rewired the whole yard. New motion sensors, silent alerts, tripwire notifications tied directly to my phone. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation, because it was clear now this wasn't about dogs, this wasn't about noise or fences or sight lines. This was psychological warfare, targeted pressure, a campaign. And Carl wasn't freelancing, he was executing a strategy. Whether it was his or someone else's didn't matter. They wanted us scared, cornered, compliant. But I've been to places where fear is the air people breathe, and the only thing more dangerous than a scared man is the one who's done being afraid. Max collapsed on a Sunday morning. We were 3 blocks from the house, on the edge of the nature trail that wrapped behind the subdivision. It was cool out, breezy, the kind of morning that used to remind me peace existed. He was walking steady, sniffing the wind, like always, ears forward. Then he staggered. 1 step, then another, like his legs forgot how to hold him. No sound, no whimper. He just sank to the ground, hard. I dropped to my knees before he hit the grass. His tongue was pale. His breathing, shallow and fast. I checked his gums, gray. That's when the cold hit my stomach. I scooped him up without thinking. 90 pounds of dead weight cradled in arms that had once carried wounded brothers through fire. I didn't feel the drive, didn't hear the music. Just the vet's voice crackling over the intercom when I burst through the doors. Emergency. Male retriever. Unresponsive. Suspected ingestion. They took him without questions. 10 minutes later, a tech came into the waiting room holding a clipboard like it weighed 1,000 pounds. We need to stabilize him before we run full labs, she said gently, but initial signs suggest anticoagulant poisoning, rat poison, a strong one. I didn't respond. I just looked at the floor. It doesn't make sense, I muttered. He never leaves my side, never eats off the ground. She paused. This wasn't accidental. That kind of exposure would have had to be baited. Hidden. Maybe something tasty. We'll know more once we flush his system. The word baited kept ringing. I sat in that clinic for 7 hours. Max survived. Barely. They pumped him full of fluids, vitamin K, and activated charcoal. He was unconscious most of the day, twitching in his sleep like his body couldn't tell if it was dreaming or dying. When the vet finally came out, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "This was intentional. This was a targeted exposure. You need to figure out who has access to your property." I drove straight home. But not to the house, to my neighbors. Steve, the only man on the street who'd still speak to me without checking his surroundings first. Steve was a retired firefighter, sharp as hell, and had ring cameras front and back. When I told him what happened, his face went pale.
"They were near your fence Friday night," he said.
I saw lights, figured it was maintenance, didn't think twice. We pulled the footage, and there it was. Carl, 11:42 p.m. Black hoodie, clipboard still in hand like it was some kind of sick joke. He crouched near my side gate, glanced around once, and dumped something into the bushes, then again near Max's kennel. Then he walked off like he'd taken out the trash. My hands clenched so tight around Steve's counter I left fingerprints in the granite. "You're calling the cops, right?" Steve asked. I did. And they came. Took my statement, copied the footage, asked questions. But 2 days later, the file was referred to the HOA's legal department for civil resolution. When I pushed, the officer shrugged. "We don't have evidence of a crime, sir. Could have been yard treatment. Could have been a raccoon incident. Unless someone confesses, it's inconclusive." Inconclusive. I had time-stamped footage of a man dumping something in my yard hours before my dog nearly died, and it was inconclusive. The HOA's official response came the next day. A glossy pamphlet in a bright yellow envelope, titled "Wildlife Safety in Ridgewater Pines." Inside, tips for storing pet food, keeping water bowls clean, and a full-page warning about increased rodent activity in the region. Buried in fine print, a line read, "The board is not liable for accidental wildlife exposure. Residents are advised to exercise caution with outdoor pets." No mention of Carl, no mention of the footage, just a tidy little gaslight wrapped in Helvetica font. That's when the following began. Not subtle, not covert. Day 3 after the incident, I noticed the black SUV again. Same one from before. Parked 4 houses down. Same spot every day, engine idling for 10 to 15 minutes before pulling off. On day 5, it followed me to the grocery store. Slowed when I slowed, waited when I waited. That night, my security cams caught a silhouette near our front steps. 3:02 a.m. No attempt to break in. Just a slow, deliberate walk to the porch, a pause, then back to the street. No plates on the vehicle. Every instinct I had screamed surveillance op. I called in favors. Reached out to a friend still active in state-level tactical response. Sent him the footage. His reply came 5 hours later. "That's private. Not police, not military, probably hired, probably HOA." The word hired stuck in my brain like a thorn. I filed formal complaints, emailed every local department, reported the stalking, the trespassing, the poisoning. You know what I got back? Due to the civil nature of HOA disputes, We advise mediation through the Ridgewater Pines Neighborhood Committee. Mediation. As if this was a spat about a garden hose and not someone trying to kill my dog and watch me unravel. My wife lost her patience first. I came home to boxes in the living room, not all of them. Just enough to make a point. "We need to go," she said. "This isn't worth it anymore, Mark. Not Max, not Ava, not us. We are not safe here." She was crying before she finished the sentence. And I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give her peace. But I couldn't, because the truth hit me harder than any argument. If we left now, they won. Carl wins. The board wins. The coward in the SUV wins. If we packed up and vanished, the message would be clear to every HOA in the country. You can terrorize a family into silence if you wrap it in legalese. I looked at her and shook my head slowly. "We're not leaving," I said. "We've been retreating for months. Backing up, giving ground, ducking our heads. Not anymore. They're going to hurt you," she whispered. "They already tried," I replied. "And they're about to find out why that was the worst decision of their lives." That night, I sat on the porch with Max beside me. He was thin now, shaky, but alive. His head on my boot, his eyes never blinking. Behind me, Ava was asleep on the couch. My wife paced the hallway. The SUV never came that night. But I waited for it anyway, sipping black coffee and staring into the dark. I wasn't scared. I was ready. The kind of ready that only comes after you've survived enough to know exactly what you're capable of. They thought they were picking on a guy with a dog, a guy with a family, a guy with no power. They forgot to ask who I used to be. Now, they were about to remember. I didn't hit back right away. That's what they expected. That's how they'd built their whole strategy. Provoke me into rage, record the fallout, twist the narrative. No. If they wanted war, I'd give them something they didn't understand. Patience, precision, psychological demolition disguised as procedural compliance. I started with surveillance. Not the backyard cameras or doorbell rigs they already knew about. I rewired my gutters to hide two 1008 trail cams, one aimed at the street, the other at the mailbox. I installed a thermal sensor beneath the flower bed and set up a vibration-triggered dash cam in the old truck I'd parked crooked in the driveway, on purpose, to give them something to fixate on. Within days, I had everything. Carl pacing outside the house after midnight. Another man, bald, heavy-set, gloves, leaving envelopes at our side gate. A woman in an HOA windbreaker snapping photos of my wife through our window while pretending to check a clipboard. Every angle, every intrusion, all time-stamped, all quietly cataloged. Then came Phase 2, legal killbox. I contacted a man named Owens, former JAG attorney, retired from Naval Legal Services Command. Old contact from my Virginia days who owed me 2 favors, both sealed in blood and sand. When I sent him the footage, he didn't respond with outrage. He just said, "Give me a week, and send me their bylaws." I did. All 74 pages of HOA policy. Owens read it like a codebreaker. By day 4, he found the fracture point. Section 6.4, Authority Delegation Procedures. It stated that any HOA officer granted enforcement privileges must be certified by the local municipality or bonded through a third-party security firm with an active state license. Carl was neither. Not certified. Not bonded. Just a lunatic with a clipboard and a gun. Which meant every citation, every inspection, every fine he'd issued was not just void, it was illegal, impersonation of regulatory authority. Under state law, it was a misdemeanor, but under federal code, 18 U.S. Code Section 912, impersonating an officer of the United States, which includes local enforcement when connected to interstate activities, like HOA fees, contractor approvals, or real estate, could become a federal felony. I smiled. That was the crack, and I was going to drive a bulldozer through it. Next, I turned to the HOA itself. Every regime has weak links. So, I started shaking the tree. I sent anonymous letters to all 14 HOA voting members. Not threats, not accusations. Just quotes, direct passages from their own bylaws with footnotes referencing the footage I had. Do you really trust Carl to protect you when this footage goes public? Are you prepared to have your name on a legal document authorizing felonious behavior? Is your property insurance ready for what comes next? The cracks formed in 3 days. A board member named Alex Finch, treasurer, called me from a burner. "I didn't know about the gun," he said, voice shaking. "They told me you were harassing families, that your dog bit a kid. I didn't yell, I didn't scold, I just sent him the footage. 3 hours later, I had everything. Financials, meeting minutes, internal memos, and the bombshell, a group text thread titled Backyard Watchdogs, where Carl had bragged about training that mutt into compliance and referred to my daughter as Little Miss PTSD. I wanted to rip his throat out. Instead, I saved the screenshots. Owens built the case like a sniper assembles a rifle, piece by piece, no emotion, just steel and math. The night before the final HOA board meeting, we filed a federal complaint through the Department of Justice. 2 counts: impersonation of law enforcement and intentional harm to a certified service animal. We included medical records, vet testimony, witness statements, and enough video to crash a courtroom Wi-Fi system. But we didn't stop there. We CC'd the county commissioner, the local CBS affiliate, 2 homeowner legal watchdog groups, and 1 YouTuber who makes a living exposing corrupt HOAs, the kind of guy who could turn Carl into a meme before breakfast. We walked into the meeting with everything. I didn't wear a uniform, didn't flex, just jeans, boots, and a folder. Owens wore his old Navy JAG pin. The board sat at the head of the room, trying to look composed. Carl stood off to the side, arms crossed, sunglasses still on inside like a goddamn cartoon. I waited until the budget discussion ended. Then I stood, calm, quiet, controlled. "Before you continue," I said, "you'll want to read this." I handed out a dozen packets, each with its own label: O enforcement violations, evidence file, federal complaint, witness declarations. Diane, the board president, skimmed hers and blanched. Carl stepped forward, puffing his chest. "You're not on the agenda, Mark." I smiled. Neither was pointing a loaded gun at my dog. Gasps. Audible. Several homeowners turned in their seats. I hit play on the projector Owens brought. The screen lit up with Carl's face, at my fence, at night, the gun, the threat, the poisoning, the SUV, the board's silence, my daughter crying. I didn't narrate. The images did all the killing. By minute 7, 3 board members walked out. By minute 12, Diane's voice cracked as she tried to explain away policy confusion. Owens stood. "This is no longer an HOA matter," he said. "This is a federal matter. You'll all be contacted by DOJ investigators in the coming weeks. I'd advise you to retain legal counsel." Carl tried to bolt. But the moment he turned, 2 plainclothes agents from the U.S. Marshals stepped in from the back of the room. They'd been sitting in the crowd since the meeting started. "Carl DuPont," one said, "you are under arrest for impersonating a federal official and for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act." The clink of handcuffs echoed like justice in stereo. Carl shouted something about neighborhood security and deep state setups. No one listened. They dragged him out through the lobby while reporters outside snapped photos. That night, it was all over the news. Local HOA leader arrested for posing as cop, poisoning service dog. The YouTuber I'd contacted titled the video, "Oh, a Karen Zenferser just got cuffed by the feds. You won't believe why." It had 2 million views in a day. The next week, 6 board members resigned. The HOA was declared inactive pending reorganization. But there was no one left to lead. No one wanted to touch the wreckage. At the emergency town vote, I stood in motion for dissolution. The vote passed 68-2. Ridgewater Pines was no longer an HOA community. It was just a neighborhood, a free one. I declined any formal leadership role. That wasn't the point. I just wanted my house, my dog, my family, peace. A month later, Max was back to full weight. His coat was thick again, his eyes bright. He limped a little on cold mornings, but I did too. We matched. My wife started leaving the curtains open again. Ava rode her bike down the street and waved at neighbors without flinching. And me? I sat on the porch, same chair, same mug, but this time I didn't scan the horizon for threats. I just watched the crew as they arrived to remove the old HOA sign at the subdivision entrance. They ripped it out with a backhoe, dumped it into the flatbed like old scrap, and drove off. I took a sip of coffee. Max lay down beside me, his head resting on my boot. I looked out at the empty street, at the breeze in the trees, and the sound of someone mowing a lawn without needing permission. "Justice," I whispered, "isn't just about punishment. It's about making damn sure no one dares try it again. And now they won't."